Welcome to a very different Global Innovation Forum. I'm Tom Ellis and I have the pleasure of chairing the first virtual GIF conference. Now, I've been chairing GIF since 2014, and instead of being with you all in person, I find myself here, socially distanced in the middle of another UK lockdown. Now, as I won't have the pleasure of meeting you all in person, I just wanted to take a moment to introduce myself and give you some context around who I am, where some of my thinking comes from, and the company I lead. We're a global brand growth consultancy specialising in front-end insight, strategy and innovation for B2C brands. We work with leading businesses like AB InBev, Mondelez, Electrolux, PepsiCo and Unilever to solve complex problems and unlock positive growth. That's growth that adds sustainable business value, makes people's lives better, and has a positive impact on our world. We do this by giving businesses a transformative new way to look at the world, human first. Okay, so now that's out of the way, let's get going. Now, we all recognise that first and foremost, COVID is a global humanitarian emergency that needs to be addressed by a collective effort from the global community. Now, innovation, of course, has a real part to play in this. Like Bill Gates, I believe that innovation is the most powerful force for positive change in the world. But we must also recognise that this crisis has been a real challenge to the creativity, collaboration and positivity that innovation relies on. As regulars will know, and newcomers will, I hope, come to realise, the GIF community is a strong one and a supportive one. A true network of like-minded individuals who are keen to share and learn. So, as soon as it became clear that we couldn't realistically do this year in person, Max and his team innovated, adapted and worked tirelessly to create a virtual conference that can continue to nurture our community. And a huge thank you to them for making it happen. Because after months of pressure and anxiety, we think you deserve, in fact you need, a chance to sit back and reflect, to be inspired, and above all to enjoy some fantastic and thought-provoking content. Hopefully we can also live up to this year's theme of bringing back a bit of the fun along the way, for as we all know, you are more creative when you're having fun. So over the next days we will bring you more speakers than ever before, drawn from an incredibly diverse range of companies and fields. From big tech to ballet, from creating new worlds to circumnavigating this one. Covering topics that have never been more important, such as diversity and inclusivity, whilst also hopefully putting a smile on your face, because you don't have to be serious to solve serious problems. I want to start off, though, by talking about change, and how innovation needs to respond to volatile and uncertain periods such as the one we're living through. When I stood on stage last year to open the 2019 conference, who would have thought that so much could change in 12 short months? COVID has ripped up the old rules, accelerating the pace of change all around us. Since then, we've learnt a whole new lexicon, from the more serious, lockdowns, social distancing, furlough, to the more fun, enjoy a quarantini or a coronacation. We've discovered new skills and taken up new hobbies, from learning all there is to know about Zoom or a new language, to taking up yoga, baking sourdough bread and banana cake, and not to mention having to learn to cut your own hair. Or, as you can see here, letting your kids try. What's certain is that no one can pretend it's business as usual. But just as superheroes are much less useful without an impending catastrophe, so COVID has had a silver lining for innovators. When it's business as normal, there are often significant obstacles to innovation. When everything is going to plan, people tend to see the risk rather than the opportunity in doing things differently, and there's little incentive to change. Even if a clear opportunity presents itself, there is often a fear the new business will damage or cannibalise existing revenue models. Then there's what I call the strategy tax. It's hard to unravel prior strategic decisions, whether for practical reasons, such as CapEx investment, or emotional ones. It was the CEO's pet project. But difficult, Even desperate times such as these remove these obstacles to creativity. If necessity is the mother of invention, then existential crisis might just be the catalyst that drives innovation from risk to opportunity. We also know that in periods of recession, the best place to invest is in innovation. Research on investments during recession shows that increased R&D spending has a significant positive impact on a firm's performance, leading to higher long-term gains in market share and profit. So, now we have become the avengers of the corporate world, with innovation having become central to survival for many. And over the course of the next 3 days, we'll hear from innovators who have spent the last 8 months working like superheroes to adapt their businesses to changes and, in some cases, literally save them from the impact of the pandemic. Now, as Churchill said, never waste a crisis. And as innovators, we must step up, seize the opportunity and show our true value, and in doing so, change how business views and conducts innovation. Innovators, assemble. This is your time. But, to quote another superhero, with great power comes great responsibility. When the pace of change has never been this fast, those responsibilities can weigh heavy. In these circumstances, we have a responsibility to not just show we can save the day, but also to really influence how our companies think about change and cope with volatility. And this means we need to be building on solid foundations. We need to be confident that the shifts in strategy and execution we're driving today will be just as relevant tomorrow in a hopefully post-pandemic world. The human brain is hardwired to pay attention to anything new, different or unusual. It's part of what makes innovation so attractive. But we also suffer from availability bias. That's the tendency to think that examples of things that come readily to mind are more representative than is actually the case. So we tend to misjudge the magnitude of events that have happened recently. And all this means that our businesses, which, let's face it, are nothing but bunches of human beings, have a tendency to chase the new and get distracted by the short-term volatility. But while all the world around us is obsessing over what is changing, innovators, conversely, must obsess about the things that aren't likely to change. We must take the longer view. Now, we're shortly going to learn more about innovation culture at Amazon, and Jeff Bezos very much gets this counterintuitive thought. Let me quote one of the most astute innovators and certainly the wealthiest in the world today. I very frequently get the question, what's going to change in the next 10 years? And that's a very interesting question. It's also a very common one. I almost never get the question, what's not going to change in the next 10 years? And I submit to you that that second question is actually the more important of the two, because you can build a business strategy around the things that are stable in time. Bezos is urging us all to step back and to take the long view, to take the time to understand what's not changing. That is a foundation on which you can build a business. When you build on something that you know is true in the long term, you can afford to invest real time, effort and resource into it, knowing it will pay dividends. So, how can we divine the difference between what's transitory and what's long-lasting? How can we stay contemporary and relevant in a world where change seems to be the only constant? Well, at Brand Genetics, we believe seeing the world human first is key to solving complex challenges. So our answer is to look through the lens of human nature. While technologies change, businesses change, and markets change, it is human nature that remains constant. As so much the world advances at the speed of Moore's law, seemingly doubling in speed every year, humans advance at the pace of Darwin's law. For example, it takes over 3,000 years for a genetic adaptation to emerge in humans, and that's a lot faster than originally thought. That means our genetic makeup, including the genes that influence the products and services that our brains find attractive, has changed very little in the 80,000 years since we were hunter-gathering on the plains of Africa. The minds of today's consumers emerged in and are much better adapted to that hunter-gatherer past, which accounts for 90% of human history, rather than contemporary consumer culture. So it's useful to consider how the evolved instincts of those Stone Age minds, core needs around sex, status and survival, still shape our choices in life today. And so I want to quickly share 3 human-first tools that can help you to see through the fog of change and chart a course to innovation success. Now, most of you will be familiar with my first tool, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But don't dismiss it as old hat just yet. This motivational theory was first developed back in 1943, comprising of a tiered model of human needs, often depicted as hierarchical levels within a pyramid. Now, in short, the theory suggests more basic needs, those lower down the hierarchy, must be more or less met before individuals can attend to the needs higher up. There's a lot of nuance and dispute, it has to be said, around such a simple model. Maslow himself suggested that the order of needs is not rigid, but instead flexible based on external circumstances or individual differences, and noted that most behaviour is multi-motivated, that is, simultaneously determined by more than one basic need. But right now it's a model worth revisiting because the research is clear. At times of stress, people's focus is more likely to move down the pyramid. And as we continue in this pandemic and global recession, people are under significant stress. So this means when it comes to innovation, ideas that address more basic needs are likely to be more successful than ones that focus solely on the higher order needs. Now, of course, as Maslow recognised, most innovation will address a number of needs, but we can already see how some of the big winners of COVID play to these rules. For example, the acceleration of the health and wellness trend since COVID has come less from the desire for social media recognition, and more because being healthy is a clear survival advantage at a time of pandemic. So, dust down your pyramids and reconsider if and how you're meeting those lower down needs. Secondly, and to build on that, I wanted to share Bain's elements of value pyramid. We're pyramid-tastic here, which is particularly relevant given the recession we're in. As you know, value is benefit minus cost. And this isn't just relevant in a recession, value is increasingly transparent in today's world, so people are becoming more practiced and more skillful value seekers, a shift that will only accelerate. But don't make the mistake of confusing offering value for being the same as reducing price. Instead, we need to become more sophisticated in identifying and offering the most relevant benefits. Now, in the model you can see, Bain identified 30 elements of value, and this model traces its conceptual roots to Maslow. The elements of value approach extends his insights by focusing on people as consumers, describing their behaviour more explicitly as it relates to products and services. The most powerful forms of value live at the top, but to be able to deliver on those higher order elements, a company must provide at least some of the functional elements required by that particular category. The key is to understand which elements your consumers value most, though you shouldn't accept a consumer statement just at face value. Context is also key. For example, during COVID, we've seen that consumers globally value services and products that reduce their anxiety, reduce their risks, and provide some sense of safety and belonging. Innovators should therefore consider whether they're delivering against these types of value. If not, their innovations are likely to be ignored or worse, make consumers even more anxious. Look at Peloton, which not only reduces risk by avoiding the gym, but also provides a sense of belonging to a global fitness community. And one might argue a healthy dose of badge value too. To figure out which elements are most relevant for your consumer ultimately requires a process of careful research and analysis, with skillful researchers able to probe stated preferences to identify what's driving them. But it's a worthwhile effort that will provide real focus to innovation in both the immediate future and the longer term. Lastly, we should recognise that humans are more than just value seekers. Ultimately, we all want to be happy. Happiness, or subjective well-being as psychologists would term it, is defined as experiencing and evaluating life positively. And people's right to be happy is recognised as a key goal by the UN, the World Economic Forum, and it's even written into the US Constitution. So, the final tool I want to share is the Arc of Happiness, a foundational framework from positive psychology that describes our 3 core psychological needs for subjective well-being: autonomy, relatedness, and competence. The universal need for autonomy is about self-determination, experiencing freedom, choice, and control. The universal need for relatedness is about experiencing care, connection, and affiliation through social attachment and positive relationships. The universal need for competence is about experiencing achievement, mastery, and success. And innovation that helps consumers to experience any of these will in turn help to foster happiness. So, think about the growth of Marie Kondo's decluttering, which shows people taking back control of their environment, exercising autonomy. The Zoom boom, a service that allows us to connect with our colleagues and friends, building relatedness. Even Britain's recent pub quiz boom demonstrates our needs for competence, or incompetence on my part. And we can see that COVID and recession has negatively impacted these 3 core drivers. A virus that we can't control and more authoritarian government actions like lockdowns have damaged our sense of autonomy. Social distancing, working from home, lockdowns, home quarantining have led to increased isolation and reduced our sense of relatedness. Job losses, furlough, or just simply the fact that so many of us having to figure out new ways to do our jobs means we're experiencing less competence. So it's no wonder that an anxiety pandemic has been one of the consequences of COVID, with a number of people reporting mental health issues skyrocketing. Symptoms of anxiety and depressive disorders have more than tripled amongst US adults compared to this time last year. And a study by the Red Cross released last month showed 51% of respondents surveyed across 7 countries reported that COVID had negatively impacted their mental health. So, finding ways to help people overcome these barriers to happiness is a real opportunity for innovation. Think about how you can give people control of their lives again, even in just a small way, or help them care for others and feel cared for, or make them feel like they've achieved something. You'll be doing your bit for the world, but it's also good business. The human brain is hardwired to seek out autonomy, relatedness, and competence. And when people find products and services that enable them to achieve these needs, it not only makes them happy, but studies show they're willing to pay a premium and are more likely to buy again. A real win-win. So there are the 3 tools, all rooted in deep understanding of human nature, that can provide guidance and inspiration for where you should look to innovate moving forward. Build from these and you can be confident that your innovations will be relevant, meaningful, and stand the test of time. And just one bonus test. This is a little exercise that we at Brand Genetics have always found to be really powerful for creating long-term growth. If you want to create something that will still be relevant in 10 years' time, don't fret about gearing it towards the future. Instead, ensure it's relevant both today and at a clearly defined point in the past, let's say 20 years ago. This counterintuitive thought, negative forecasting, comes from Nicholas Nassim Taleb, author of Black Swan and Anti-Fragile. He suggests that time is a detector of fragility. What has survived over time has some resistance to random events. So what is fragile will eventually break under the weight of time, but the longer something lasts, the more likely it is to be anti-fragile and be sustained. So for example, when it comes to meeting your mate, if you look at Tinder or Bumble, they were as likely to be relevant to my parents and their parents as it would be to any young person today. It still builds on that fundamental human need. So from a human perspective, this makes perfect sense. If you're offering something that meets a need relevant to people 20 years ago as well as today, then it's likely to be solving a long-established human goal, not just something that's a passing fad. If I can leave you with one final thought, it would be this. One thing our study of human nature shows is that the human race is nothing if not resilient. And we will overcome this pandemic as we have many pandemics and challenges before. And I would argue that we'll overcome these challenges because of 2 critical human superpowers that are highly relevant to us all here. First, because collaboration and working together is a fundamental human skill, and one we must continue to cherish and nurture, especially in times like these, when pandemics and sometimes politics push us apart. And secondly, to innovate is core to being human. We're constantly seeking the new and the improved. Together, we can build on these to ensure innovation is a true force for good in the world that can help us overcome challenges the scale of COVID and even bigger challenges such as global poverty and climate change in the future. So, that's it from me. I hope you found it useful and thought-provoking. If you have any thoughts, questions, challenges, please don't hesitate to share them. But of course, it's only the beginning of the conference, and we've got a great few days lined up for you. I would encourage you all to get involved, participate, collaborate as much as possible, especially in this virtual edition, because then you will get much more out of it. And I would like to say at the beginning, a big preemptive thank you to all our speakers, sponsors, organisers, and of course you, the attendees. Without you, it would literally not have been possible.